Hi, Dave. Congratulations. Welcome to Philadelphia.
Thank you,
What
Matt. Appreciate it.
what was the sales pitch? I know that you're in trying to do this thing in Nashville, and how did John Middleton lure you to Philadelphia?
Well, it's a great question, and it probably takes a little bit of an explanation. So, moving here to Nashville as part of the thought process of Music City Baseball to be part of the community here to try to bring Major League Baseball through expansion or relocation here to eventually be the National Stars Baseball Club. So I joined the venture. I've been consulting throughout the past year and moved here in the beginning of September with my wife. We rented a place and building a home. Really, with the thought process that we are going to make with our group, try to bring a club here to be in a position where we did all the things in a proper fashion to hopefully make a presentation to Major League Baseball at the winter meetings in 2021. Maybe they'll be talking about expansion just to be ready. Try to get a ballpark location, investors involved, diversity, all of that. Well, really focused on that. I had a couple of clubs reach out to me during the fall, and I thanked them because I've always loved being the head of a baseball operation, the general manager, president of baseball operations, but told them I was really committed here at that point. Um, so the Phillies were one of the clubs that had reached out to me a couple times. I know Andy McPhail for years. We're very good friends. He reached out to me, and I told him exactly what I just told you. And he called me as late as last Saturday with kind of reaching out once again. Um, he left me a message and said that John Middleton would like to talk to me. So just when John calls me, not to be surprised. I got that message on Monday. John and I talked Tuesday morning. But in the meantime, what had happened, got some information from Major League Baseball through the commissioner's office on Monday and in turn on Tuesday that the time frame we were hoping for here in Nashville, although a premium market, top market, to me, this is going to happen here. It's a situation where the timing due to COVID, the uncertainties facing the game, it wasn't going to take place in the time frame of 2021 presentations and time frame to be determined, pushed back a little bit. Well, with that, my responsibilities, what I need to do, will be diminished. Not really much to do this coming year, and just so happened, and again, it's a coincidence situation that John called me on Tuesday in the morning and talked to me for about an hour to try to keep an open mind about coming to Philadelphia. He did not think himself, from what he knew, that expansion was going to take place in the near future, down the road, but not in the near future. So he talked at great length for about an hour. Once I got the additional information, also spoke to Andy. And then John talked to me again on Wednesday morning, and so did Andy. And so it really came down to a very quick situation, but it was really John Middleton. And again, I've known Andy for years, so feel very comfortable in that regard. But it was John reaching out and really trying to make me part of the Phillies organization. I feel very comfortable with him. I've known him throughout the years. He has a great reputation. I think he's a great owner. He's very, wants to win. He's a Philadelphia fan. He'll do what he can to win, and somebody that I look forward to working with. So that was really the story behind it.
Hey, Dave, congratulations.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask you, do you consider this, first of all, a rebuild or a retool? And do you have any assurances that you'll have the financial flexibility to spend as you desire? And will you bring in a general manager?
Well, I consider it a retool, not a rebuild, for sure. I mean, I think there's too many good players on the club. And the way I've looked at it, we have a star player in right field in Bryce and some other good players around him. But anytime you have three good starting pitchers like we have at the top of the rotation, you're in pretty good shape to be competitive. Now, there's other things that need to be done. When you're talking about Nola and Wheeler and Eflin, that's a good place to start with some other arms behind them. So I think it's a retool. Now, when I say this, I know John wants to win. We have flexibility of finances. But when I say that, I don't think it's unlimited amount of funds. I mean, you always realize there's some type of budget. attached to that. We will work within that. But we're also we want to win this year. We'll do what we can. We've got a great manager in Joe Girardi. He's won a commitment to that. I think it's more important, too, that we build an organization that can be competitive year in, year out. So that'll really be the focus in addition to trying to win. So I don't look at this as a situation where we're one player away from winning. I think we need to do a few things with this team. And I really don't want to be sacrificing people that might be part of our future success for short-term gains if it's not the difference maker in trying to be a championship club.
And as far as the GM, Dave?
Oh, I'm sorry about the GM. That's a great, you know what, I don't really know that answer because I really want a chance to get to know the people in the organization. My instincts are that there's a strong likelihood, but I don't want to make that 100% commitment until I get to know the individuals better. I know them, almost everybody at the upper level, but have, of course, never worked with them. Want to know responsibilities and who's in the office and who does what before I make that decision.
All right, next up we'll go to Todd Zalecki from MLB.com and then Jamie Apodi from Channel 6.
Hi, Dave. Hey, just like for clarification purposes, is your expectation that payroll will decrease to some extent this season, that you'll be dealing with more of a fixed budget? Because I think when people heard you got the job, they said, okay, the Phillies are going to unload here and just start spending money like crazy. And I think a lot of people have reported the opposite to be true, that budgets are still expected to drop. Payrolls is still expected to drop to an extent.
Well, I know where the payroll was last year. And of course, when you talk about COVID and everything taking place and the number of free agents we have, I wouldn't expect it to be at that same amount as last year. John, and when I talk to him and from what I've heard from individuals and what he's expressed to me, I know what it is now, where it is. There's flexibility to do things, but I think we'll look at each and every move in an intelligent fashion, and if something makes sense, we'll react to that. But I don't by any means come in here and think we have an unlimited amount to spend. And I think you have to be careful, and I know what people say and expectations are, but I think you make moves to try to win when you think they make sense, and you add payroll when they make sense to make a difference. And depending where you are as organizations, those things come at different time periods. So over the last time period for myself, I've been with clubs that have won, unfortunately, and I say this, to win quite a bit, 7 of the last 9 years of divisional champions. But there was a time where we built clubs too. I mean, I was with Detroit when we built that organization and then spend money. And so I think it's more of doing things in a smart fashion, working with people within the organization, making intelligent decisions. And in John's case, he's on board with that. And the thing that's impressive to me, as you can tell, he wants to win. But let's have a plan and let's approach things. I have no idea. I don't think anybody knows where this free agent market is going this wintertime. You've seen very few people sign. And it'll be interesting to see what takes place and what we end up doing.
Do you see enough flexibility in your mind, or is there enough flexibility, or is there a path to A, bring back JT Realmuto, and then B, supplement the rest of the roster with some complementary pieces to build a winning team? Can you do both?
I don't know that because I really haven't gotten into specific question. I do know the first part. Everybody in the organization loves JT. I mean, that's anybody I talk to. So I think there's a unanimous feeling they'd like to bring him back. Now, those things are never easy. We've always a lot of us have dealt with free agent markets in the past. But that feeling is mutual from John on down through the rest of the staff. So there is some flexibility to make moves there. But again, can you get something like that done? I'm not sure.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Hi, Dave. Welcome to Philadelphia.
Thank you.
Virtually, I guess. So this fan base, I'm sure you're well versed in. They like to win here in Philly. And when Bryce Harper arrived and then Joe Girardi arrived, I think the expectation was playoffs for sure, and then that didn't happen. What is your time frame? I mean, you said you've run so many successful franchises. You talked about a bit of a retool. You talked about building for the future. What are your expectations for this team next season? Can they put a playoff caliber team on the field?
Well, I think the answer to that is yeah. I mean, I want to win too. We all want to win, but you also want to do things that you just don't sacrifice your long-term unless you think you're a championship caliber club. And I think it's too early for me to answer that question yet. But I don't think from my conversations with anybody, and I'm speaking with John, speaking with Andy, speaking with Joe Girardi, speaking with Ned, speaking with Matt, and I have, and we'll speak to many more people. I don't think anybody thinks like we're a player away. I mean, we have some holes to plug. How can we do that? I think only time will tell. Trade conversations taking place, free agency out there with an uncertain market. So do we want to win? Yes. Do we have? There's some good clubs in the division, as you know. I mean, Braves have a good young club. They've won the division here a couple of years, and they're good. You see the Mets have made a big move. Washington world champion a couple of years ago. The Marlins an improving team. But I think we're in a position where we have a lot of nice pieces to win. But we're going to have to do some other things to make it successful, and it's what we're going to try to do.
Okay, next up we'll go to Scott Lauber from the Inquirer, and then Mega Montemuro from the Athletic.
Hi, Dave.
Hey, Scott, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good, thank you.
So I'm just curious. Today's December 11th. And normally you start to build a team in the off season a couple months earlier than this. And with the work you've been doing in Nashville on the expansion, on trying to get a franchise there, how much kind of sort of getting up to speed in a hurry is there going to be now for you? What's the next few weeks going to look like, just in terms of getting to where you want to understand the organization at a level where you can take the next steps?
Well, there won't be a lot of sleep involved over the next couple of weeks. I've done this before. There's a lot to be done. I mean, it's just, and you're right, you're walking into the middle of it in December, where a lot of things are already taking place. So you have to get up to par very quickly. I've already had a long conversation yesterday with Ned Rice, who's able to fill me in on a lot of up-to-date information. He's sending me more. I had a long conversation with Joe Girardi yesterday. I've had a long conversation with Andy McPhail about their feelings of the club, what our needs are. Got many more phone calls to make as far as members of the organization are concerned to get their thought processes. I've already received, I bet you, from at least half the general managers in Major League Baseball, welcome back, congratulations, let's talk. So I'll get up to speed with those conversations with Ned, who's been having most of them at this time. But there's a lot to be done. It's just, I mean, that's the way it is. It's getting to know your personnel within your own organization, not only trying to improve your club on the field, but I need to get to know a lot of people in the front office. And of course, the challenge is not only getting to know them, but getting to know them in a Zoom environment. So, but it'll be a busy time period. I look forward to it. It's one that it's extremely important because you win with good organizations. Always have believed that. It starts at the top with the owner. I'm impressed. I bet you I've spoken to John Middleton 15 times in the last year, going through, of course, contractual stuff. And it's been great to talk to him, to talk to Andy McPhail. But it starts at the top and goes through the whole organization. And I know there's a lot of good people in the organization. I've heard that for years, had a lot of respect for them. But it's getting to know people on a first-hand basis because they need to get to know me too.
Hi, Dave. One of the challenges the Phillies have faced the last few years, and even beyond the previous regime, has been developing players and the farm system. So how do you tackle the evaluation of that with something that obviously has so much implications for the success of the big league team, not only in 21 but beyond that?
Well, again, that's a great question. I mean, how do you go about it? First of all, you get to know the personnel that you're in your organization. Secondly, that's involved in the development and scouting. I've heard, of course, there's been changes in the scouting and player development the last couple of years too, and I've heard a lot of good things about the new individuals involved. I don't know them personally, but I've heard a lot of good things about them, just getting to know them. They've also added some pretty good, when you look at, and I know a lot of times people take a beating when it comes to this, but at least we added Baum last year at third base. You got a guy like Howard coming into the rotation. I mean, this is just me watching because I don't see it as much. I loved the Phillies' #1 draft choice last year. NFL. I mean, he was impressive as could be. So you get to know the personnel. I need to look at as many reports as on our young players as we can. Probably look at some video, having a chance to look at them myself. But that's what you have to do, and you try to do it as quickly as you possibly can.
We'll go to Matt Gelb from The Athletic, and then Jim Salisbury from NBC Sports.
Dave, how many changes to the front office do you anticipate this offseason, or is that less of a priority for you as you try to do this remotely, or will you be in Philadelphia? How will that work?
Well, I'll come to Philadelphia at some point when I can meet with people. So, as far as, I guess right now it's a Zoom world, so you can do that from anywhere. But I'm sure I will be there at some point. I asked a question the other day, and they said nobody's coming into the office. It's just not that environment. Now, from my own perspective, and not that it's a big ordeal, I've already had COVID. I had it like a month ago and have worked through it, but it was not an easy couple of weeks. But I've got antibodies now, so if any of you see me, you don't have to be afraid that you're going to catch it from me. I still wear my mask when I'm out and about. But, I don't anticipate, I went into Boston a few years ago. We really didn't make any major changes right off the bat. And I hear the same things about the Phillies that I did with Boston. It's getting to know people. Maybe you make adjustments and responsibilities at times. But like I talked about general manager, do we add one? Do we not add one? I'm not sure of that right now. But it's really not my style to come in and make a bunch of changes. I think it's more appropriate to give people an opportunity and see how they perform and get a chance to work with them. And hopefully we don't make any changes. But I don't anticipate walking in there right now and making any changes with anybody right now.
And you're inheriting what's kind of an unusual situation for you. It's a higher payroll with a bit of an underachieving roster, and with consensus bottom 10 farm system in the game, it's a little different than the previous iterations of teams you've encountered. What kind of challenge does that present for you, that sort of different state that the organization is in?
Well, usually when you go into an organization, there's a reason why you go in, right? The club's been struggling for a little bit. So for whatever reason, so it becomes a challenge, which is fine. I mean, it's different because when I went to, and I'll just go through, when I went to Florida, that was different, right? Complete expansion franchise. You build it up from the very beginning, which we did, and you're building and building and building, and you get to the point where you win. And then we tore it down and then built it again. And it worked out fine. They ended up winning a world championship. When I went to Detroit, that was an organization that had lost a lot of years in a row, that didn't have much talent at that point at the major league level or at the minor league level, really. And it really took a complete revampment, and we ended up taking some years to do that and ended up in the World Series about 5 years later. Now you go to Boston at the point, well, it's a little bit different. You got a tremendous amount of young talent around the field, but the club had, after winning a championship in 13, had finished in last place in 14 and 15 too. I mean, people only kind of remember the end of, but we didn't have much pitching in the organization. And really, if you look back now, how many of the pitchers that were there in the organization at the time, how many of them have been successful big league pitchers elsewhere? So we needed to add pitching. So every time you go somewhere, things need to be done. What I have found too is that, and I'll tell the story, and I've told it before, but people run with reputations at times. And so sometimes their talent's better than what you think it is, but you don't know what it is, because the reality is who's scouting all that talent. So I'll give you an example, and it goes back many, many years ago. It was when I was first general manager. I was with the Montreal Expos. So I'm sitting there, it's my first year, and I'm reading in the morning there, and they're ranking the 14 out there, 14 clubs in the National League at that time. Montreal Expos outfield, they ranked 14th in the National League. And I'm thinking, well, I think we're a little bit better than that. They're young players. Well, what was the outfield? Moises Alou in left, Marquise Grissom in center, and Larry Walker in right. So you have to take those things with a grain of salt at times, and hopefully you evaluate your own players better than anyone and be realistic with your evaluations. So those are all the challenges of being part of an organization. I'm looking forward to doing that.
Hi, Dave. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So perfect segue. You bring up scouting and evaluating your own guys. John Middleton spearheaded a movement to build an analytics department here. Spent an awful lot of money on it, adding personnel and technology and whatnot. And they use it up and down the system. Will you feel pressured to use that? How much will you use that data, that analytics, that technology in building your roster and building an organization in general? Or will you lean more, your reputation is as a scouting guy, will you lean more on your scouts? How do you play that
Sure.
balance?
Great question. And again, I know you get reputations. When we were in Detroit over the last few years, we spent the majority of our payroll on the big league roster. That's just what we did. We were trying to win. We had an owner that had owned the team for a while that was up, and that was our focus. We had a very small analytic department, a couple people. But it really, that doesn't necessarily mean it's your philosophy, it's what you're doing. So when I went to Boston, we actually incorporated analytics basically everywhere. Now, when I went there at first, and you can check with people from Boston, the analytics department, which was up front when it first started in analytics, had really kind of fallen behind. They really hadn't made many adjustments in recent years. Not as many people as they normally did, hadn't been advanced in some areas. And we really built that back. And I was all encouraging in that regard. I think you get whatever information that you possibly can, and there's a lot of good information that you receive. We had a gentleman by the name of Zach Scott, who was assistant general manager at the time, did a great job in building up our analytics department. We added people in analytics, and analytics was involved in player development, scouting, amateur and professional, big league aspect of it, basically everywhere we were. And they were involved in all of our meetings. So I'm very much for it. This is how I try to do it. I try to equally use scouting and analytics. Some people may favor scouting strictly. Some people may favor analytics strictly. I believe in combining both of them and them working together and using whatever information you possibly can to make the best judgment. So I welcome it. I very much welcome whatever information we have. And you're older. So you're not supposed to believe it, and you hear these reputations. That is not an accurate assessment, because I'm very supportive of all that type of information, and we'll continue to do so.
Will you bring any scouts with you? And the Phillies recently let some go. Any chance you possibly would bring some back?
Well, that's a tough question. First of all, the scouts, nobody wanted to let anybody go from the organization. That's a COVID-related situation. Mm-hmm. It's sad. It's the economics. I know that the scouts that were retained are good scouts. I don't even know at this point, I haven't talked to the pro scouting director, Mike Gondo, at this point, how their responsibilities are supposed to be divvied at this time, who's covering what leagues, who's doing what. I haven't even talked to them at that point. But I would say right now it'd be doubtful, with the number of layoffs that we had, that we would add more people at this time. It just philosophically doesn't seem to make much sense. But John has again indicated, he's willing to work and do what we think is right. But I'm going to guess that that's probably, even though I'm very much towards scouting, probably not something we're going to do.
And if I could just ask you real quick, I'm sorry to hold you up.
I'm here.
Matt Klintak's under contract for 2 more years. Does he have any role in your front office?
Well, I spoke to Matt yesterday, actually. I've known Matt for years. I have a great deal of respect for him. He's a very smart individual. He said he would help however he possibly could. I talked to him about some things, and I said, you know what, I would love to consult with you more and have you to talk to you. So yes, I'll use Matt. I'll see what he feels comfortable doing. It was interesting because he said, Dave, I want the Phillies to win. I want to see them win. Anything I can do to help you, I want to do. So just ask me anything. So I will talk to Matt in the future. What role he'll fill, I guess we'll again wait and see, and how many different, who's doing what at this point, which I don't know of everybody yet. But yeah, I have a great deal of respect for Matt and would hope to have him part of the decision-making process when we talk about things.
Thanks much, Dave.
Sure.
Okay, we'll go to Bob Brookover from the Inquirer, and then Jason Stark from the Athletic.
Hey, David, I have a couple questions. One following up on Jim there a little bit. What do you think is the most important or what most useful analytics information for you as the guy who's making the final call on players?
Well, that's a very most useful. That's a very difficult question, because the reality is when you put together how we put together our analytics is they have their own analytical devices that they use, and they present to you the final outcome of their decision-making process. I mean, and we've all got spin rates and all those things now, and we talk about every organization uses those. But I've also been involved when you're talking about delivery angles, and you're talking about analytics as far as projecting contracts for the future, age. It's basically involved everywhere. And what's interesting to that is I have had conversations with analytics people in the Boston organization who are very intelligent. And when you analyze this player, you don't get the same exact analyzation, even though you're using numbers from two different people, because some weigh some factors more than they weigh others. So somebody may talk about the spin rate on a breaking ball being more important than spin rate on the fastball, and so you can go on in that regard. So really, I think it's a matter of using all of that type of information in your organization. And if you say specify one, I really couldn't give you one thing that I say is the most useful.
And the other question is, how difficult is it to fix a broken bullpen, which the Phillies obviously was last season?
Yeah, it was not by no means was a strength by a means of the organization. I mean, it's, well, I guess the good part of it is that usually if there's an area that you can fix, that somebody comes through in the short term, it is a bullpen. We need multiple people out there to try to help us. We have some young arms that are developing that may fit out there, but we're going to try. We'll try. And I know that just last year they didn't have much luck in anything they did. They made that deal with the Red Sox. It didn't work out. But we'll be in a position where I'm sure we'll be very aggressive in adding arms, and we'll hopefully be successful in helping it.
Thanks.
Sure.
Hey, Dave, welcome.
Thank you, Jason. Nice to see you.
Likewise. You've traded a lot of prospects in your day, and it strikes me that your approach has been, I don't care so much who I'm giving up if I'm getting the guy back that I really want, that our team really needs. Is that a fair assessment of your philosophy on trading prospects?
Yes, to an extent, and I hate to tell like what my whole philosophy is, because you don't want to tip your hands. It's like that. But the other thing I think that goes into that, and it's always interesting, is, and I'll tell you, I'm a firm believer in young players. I love young players. So the question, so for example, in Boston when we won, well, Rafael Devers was young, we broke him in. Andrew Benintendi was young, we broke him in. We had some young, Eduardo Rodriguez was there, he ended up developing for us. So we had some, so the question becomes, which young players do you trade? So, I mean, I would trade 10 young players if we didn't think any of them could play for a guy that we really liked. So sometimes it's not quantity as far as much as you think is quality. And for example, when you trade for Chris Sale, we knew we were giving up quality. We knew Moncada and Kopech had great future ahead of him, and I still think he does, he's been hurt. So, but we knew in Moncada we were trading somebody that was going to be a good major league player. So I think it's important when you talk about that, sometimes, and I'm going to go back a long time ago, maybe you could relate to this because you've been around like that. I remember I was when a young guy with the Boston Red Sox, I was with the White Sox, and the Boston Red Sox organization, their minor leagues always had bad records. And the depth of prospects were not great. But every year, they'd produce good big league players, especially offensive players at that time. I remember asking my mentor, Roland Heeman, at that time, what's going on in the scouting? Well, he said, well, they do a great job at producing a player or two every year that are really good players. And if you go back in that time frame, you'll look at the number of good players they brought up. So sometimes it's not the depth. And I know that rankings sometimes take that into play, but philosophically, I think it's more important, this is me, not only who you get, which is the most important, but what you also give up as far as the quality is concerned.
And is there one trade, any of those trades, back in your rearview mirror, some prospect that you traded that you would like to have that deal back?
Oh, gosh, I'm sure there is, because we've all made plenty of bad deals. Well, I mean, now it depends. I mean, like I know a bad deal that I made, which I hate to, you don't want to tell people the bad stuff you're doing because you're hopefully doing more good stuff. When I was with Detroit and we traded Suarez at the time, and we traded him for Alfredo Simon at the time. He was a guy that was, we needed to plug in a starter making that type of money, and we figured Suarez was behind our other infielders, and we had some depth there. But it was not a justifiable trade. I mean, afterwards, it was not a good trade. I mean, when you look back, and again, the game was a lot different. Again, I mean, you're going to be saying these things, and you say, geez, this guy's a bum. Why did we hire him? Right? I mean, we're talking about it. But we traded Randy Johnson at one time, I mean, when I was back in Montreal, and we didn't regret it at the time because Randy wasn't quite there. We had an owner that wanted to win. We got Mark Langston, who was the best pitcher in the National League that particular year, led the league in earned run average. He pitched great for us. We ended up not re-signing him. We got a couple of draft choices, one who was Rondell White, and Gabe White was the other. But it was a situation where, if you look back, well, geez, how could you trade Randy Johnson, right? But he was actually the third guy in the order because Gene Harris and Brian Holman were ranked ahead of him at that particular time. But you look back and you say you traded Randy Johnson, well, that's not usually a good way to start off a conversation.
Thanks, Dave.
You're welcome.
We'll go to Ken Davidoff and then circle back to Matt Gilb.
Hey, Dave, congratulations.
Thanks, Ken.
Welcome back to the East.
Thank you very much.
Just you mentioned Joe Girardi a couple of times. Obviously, you've gone head to head with him for a long time. Just your thoughts of him as an adversary and now getting to work with him.
Well, first of all, I've always thought he's a very good baseball man and really good manager. When we played against him, you knew that he knew how to handle the ball club, handle his pitching staff. They were always prepared, played hard, played well, and they won too. I mean, they had a good club. So I was always impressed with Joe. He's also a person I've gotten to know throughout the years. I mean, I really liked him. I know he's a good baseball man, very intelligent, good family man. I like him a lot. I think we're thrilled to have him. So I'm just, I think he's a championship type of manager, and that's what you look to have in every position. So we're fortunate.
Thank you, Dave.
You're welcome.
Dave, he's not involved in the day-to-day anymore, but have you reached out or will you reach out to Pat Gillick to get his 10,000-foot view sort of the organization? He can maybe tell it like it is.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I have not reached out to him yet. I just haven't had a chance to pick up the phone and call him, and he as well as 25 other people in the organization yet. But yes, for sure. I've known Pat for years. I mean, since I started. I mean, back in 1978. I consider him actually a friend throughout the time periods. So when I've been around him, I know his wife Doris. Pat's he's one of the best baseball men in my time frame in the game. So I definitely will reach out to Pat and welcome his feedback on everything. As well as there's other advisors. I'm very, you got Charlie Manuel, you got Larry Boas that's there. So there's some impressive people that I'll look forward to having conversations when time allows.
Okay, we got time for a few more. We will go to Ron Blum and then Howard Megdal.
Hi, Dave. Congratulations.
Thank you, Ron. Appreciate it.
Looking back over 4 decades, how have your views of how to assemble a club changed both because of how the way the game is played and having nothing to do with the changes in the game?
Who? If that's how long I've been in the game, 4 decades, it's a little scary, huh? Well, I think I mean, it's a great question. I'd have to contemplate. I think I've always believed in pitching. I've always believed in power arms. And it was something that I grew up with the White Sox organization. We had a lot of good young pitching at that time. Richard Dotson, Britt Burns, Lamar Hoyt, and the list kind of went on. So Paul Richards was in charge there. So I've always liked that aspect of it. I've always put an emphasis on it. One place where I will say I'm a little old-fashioned compared to what contemporary is. I still like our starters to give us 6 to 7 innings. Especially if you're a good starting pitcher, I like 7 innings out of a starting pitcher. But I also don't believe 7 innings and 140 pitches either. I mean, there's a pitch limit. So I do believe in that a great deal. I think that you win with starting pitching, and I don't know people can win with bullpens too, but I do like good starting pitching. So that hasn't changed. I do think that the aspect of up the middle when I first started was basically thought of defensively, primarily when you talked about short, second, center, even catcher. And I don't know that catcher's changed a lot because you have to handle a pitching staff. But the ability to get no offense or limited offense out of up the middle, that no longer is the way you build a club because there's a lot of offense in the game. I understand the launch angle aspect of it. And also, too, I mean, unless people did it accidentally when I first started, like, for example, with pitching, people didn't pitch up in the zone at that time. That's changed. It's a very effective way of pitching. So that's something that's changed throughout the time period, the north-south. Used to pitch to the corners almost all the time. Not that you still don't. But I think that the up-the-middle aspect of it has changed. I think philosophically, people used to run more than they do now. I'm comfortable with that, although I'm not all the way with that. You never run, which some organizations do. I will also say where I'm comfortable with the launch angle, but I'm also an individual, and I philosophically, and other people may not agree with this, but I do like people that use the whole field still with hitting. I'm not just a pull-oriented type of guy, a home run or nothing individual. And I realize that some guys are harder to hit out of the ballpark with the pure stuff that they have. But I still like the approach of where people aren't pulling off the ball on a consistent basis. So those would be some generalities.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dave, thanks for the time. Really appreciate it. I have 2 for you. One on Nashville. Given the information that you got from Major League Baseball, I'm wondering if beyond just a change in the time frame, if you feel like there's a change in how likely it is when rather than if, when it comes to there being a major league either expansion or relocation ultimately in the city.
Well, I think it's going to happen here. That's me personally. So it's when. I mean, the city is tremendous. It's a growing city. It's a vibrant city. And I've traveled around till last year for 30 years at the major leagues level. You get a feeling when a city is a big league city or not. This is a major league city. And in addition to that, I mean, you can see the downtown area. It's tremendous. It's young. It's vibrant. The community supports you. Good people involved here. So it's going to happen. It's a natural place to be. I think it's a can't miss. Now, again, you have to get a ballpark built eventually. You have to be in a position, which I think will happen, that proper ownership steps up. But it's not a question to me that it's going to happen. It's just with everything that's take place, it's more the when rather than the if.
And just as far as the bullpen, which you were speaking about before, you've obviously had at the head of your bullpens very different types of pitchers, whether it's Craig Kimbrell or Todd Jones or Jeff Reardon, depending on whichever we want to talk about. Obviously, it seems like the straightest distance to improving this team, that for all its bullpen problems with a 7+ ERA, was still in it into the final weekend, would be there. I'm wondering what your philosophy is for how to build a bullpen in 2021, and whether the fact that there's a large number of relievers on the free agent market at a time where not a lot of teams are making early moves plays a part in the way you would go about attacking it?
No, that's a great question. And you know, and when you mentioned that, Ron had asked me the question of what's changed. One of the places where I've changed, and I think the philosophy for many years was if you had a closer and a setup guy, you'd build the rest of your bullpen. I've really changed that depth is also, you need somebody that closes a game. I still believe myself, and I think most baseball people do, that pitch in the ninth inning is a little different than most, although sometimes you leverage your guys. I'm not against that. I've seen managers leverage their best relievers in the seventh inning or eighth inning and have somebody else close. But in general, most good clubs have a guy who closes the game. I still believe in that. But I do think that you need more depth than you used to. And I think now the negative part is our bullpen needs a lot of fixing. We have some holes. The positive part is that it's an opportunity. So if we're aggressive, I would, if you're a reliever and you have a choice of A or B, and A's got a pretty good bullpen and B is us, and it's not good, well, hopefully people are choosing us because there's opportunity here. So we need to make sure that we're aggressive toward that. I know there's a lot of relievers out there. And I will admit that something that's happened throughout my career, I mean, all of a sudden you take a good arm guy that you fix a little bit in their delivery, and all of a sudden they're an effective reliever for you. Now, they may not last for the long term, but they may be good for a year or two. And I do think that's a possibility. You're welcome.
Okay, we'll take two more. We will go to Jim Salisbury, and then we'll finish up with Scott Lauber.
Thanks, Greg. Hey, Dave, as someone who spent his lifetime or adult lifetime in baseball, and I'm sure you've observed the entire industry, all teams, what is sort of the wide angle industry view of the Philadelphia Phillies? They've had two good runs in their history, but really unable to sustain long-term success. I mean, how are they viewed from afar as an outsider? Are they viewed as a sleeping giant or the gang that couldn't shoot straight? What is your take on that?
Well, I can't, you know what, I in that sense, I really can't answer that question thoroughly. I mean, because I don't have a total pulse of that. The way I would say that we looked at the Phillies was sort of a sleeping giant because they've got a big market. They've got a solid owner that wants to spend money to win. And when you usually have that combination, it's a good baseball city. It's a I mean, I've been in East Coast, I mean, in Boston, it's the passionate East Coast baseball city, right? Quick to boo if things don't work, but great to cheer. It's passionate. So there's a lot of upside potential. But then I will also say that over the last handful, half a dozen years, whatever it is, you sort of scratch your head and say, gee, I wonder why they're not winning. What's happening over there? Because I mean, last year, if you'd asked me before the season, are the Phillies going to make the playoffs? And you'd say, oh, it looks like they should make the playoffs. They have a heck of a chance to make the playoffs. So they've been close, but they just haven't got it going. And so that would be the response I would have.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dave, you've run 4 teams. You've taken 3 of them to the World Series. This will be your 5th team. And I know you explained the process that took you from Nashville to coming back to run another team, but I was just wondering, you know, how much of a pull there was to adding another chapter because you were unsatisfied with the way the last chapter ended. You know, do you feel like you've got a little bit more to do as a team executive and feel like this is an opportunity to do that?
Well, again, great question. So when I left Boston, myself personally, I wasn't prepared to say, okay, I'm not ever going to do this. I really thought I'd have another 4 or 5 year run. You know, at that point, fortunately, my health's been good. I love what I'm doing, always have. I'm passionate about it, so it's easy for me to do. I don't mean easy to perform, but it's easy to go and do what I need to do on a daily basis. It didn't end the way I wanted it to, and I always felt that. I actually thought that would be in Boston rather than anybody else, but the feelings there were different. So it was a hard situation. I sat down with my wife, Carrie, and we talked about it. I was paid through October of this year. I didn't need to rush into anything that took place. And when Nashville approached me last year, basically in December for the first time, and we talked in over a couple month period, it was a question. What I needed to do was to ask myself, okay, if this ends here as far as being a general manager, will I be content going to Nashville based upon the circumstances there? Because it's something completely different. I mean, you're trying to start a franchise from the very beginning. There's nobody really, very few people working in the front office and working with you, trying to put a franchise and start it from the beginning. Investors, franchise, stadium, diversity, personnel, blah, blah, from there on. And my answer to myself was, I think I can do that. And the reason ended up being and I didn't make that commitment right away, but when I came to Nashville and was involved, I was very impressed with the people here. I worked closely with a couple of individuals, John Law and Alberto Gonzalez. I was very impressed with them and the group of individuals. Also another gentleman, Lee Barfield. Really thought they were sharp individuals. They had a good plan. And so I liked it. I liked working with them. And I thought that Nashville, we love the city. I think it's a tremendous city. People are very friendly, a supportive community. So my thought process, I think this can work. It's not going to be easy, but I think it could work. And with that process going through my mind, said, you know what, I'm comfortable to do this. And we'll turn down all interview requests for anybody of a general manager. And I had really made that decision and followed through with it until the news I got earlier in the week kind of changed that time frame for me. So the part of it, I'm looking forward to going forward. I'm really enthusiastic about it. I think the Phillies, we have a chance to be really good as time goes on. It's when you talk about ownership, city support, the players we have to start with the organization, I'm thrilled about the opportunity of making it happen.
Dave, thanks so much for joining us today, and thank you to everybody in the Philadelphia media. Everybody stay safe, have a happy holidays, and we'll talk to you all soon.